if you calculate the sum in India or in South Pole or in North Pole. But language differs from some area, from some territory. It also differs from people to people. Even the words are being used, they are also different. So statutes are written in language, so it can be the ambiguous meaning. One word can have more than one meaning. It is called ambiguity of the word. So this particular Sir Denning observed that the English language is not an instrument of mathematical precision. Further, he observed, it would certainly save the judges trouble if acts of parliament, which means statutes, were drafted with divine preciseness and perfect clarity. It would certainly save the judges trouble if these statutes were drafted with divine preciseness. Divine preciseness means the rule of a God. The human beings are not God, so they cannot draft anything without any mistake. This is the heart of this observation of Sir Denning. As the person who has drafted, the authority which is drafted is not the divine authority, there is always some lacuna in each and every statute. It will be helpful to the court if the statute is drafted without mistake. Further, this Sir Denning says that in the absence of any mistake, a judge cannot simply fold his hands and blame the draftman, which means if the draftman has committed any mistake, judge cannot sit like this by folding his hand. I cannot do anything because the draftman has committed the mistake. In this manner, court cannot sit by folding his hand. Court has to explain these mistakes as void or as valid. So it is the task of a judge, when any mistake is committed by draftman, judge has to make it clear. Rather he will declare void or he will declare valid mistake. So it is the task of a judge, in case of mistake, he should not sit like this. He should unfold his hands and start to scrutinize each and every provision of this statute, and he should clear the mistake of the statute. By interpretation, this can be done. This is the object of interpretation. Further, Sir Denning says that he must set to work on the constructive task of finding the intention of Parliament, as I explained. The most important point of this observation, I have written it in bold. A judge must not alter the material of which it is woven, but he can and should iron out the creases. The judge must not alter the material of which it is woven. The material provisions of the statute cannot be altered by a judge. Then what the judge should do? He should iron the creases. If you want to wear a neat and clean shirt or a dress or a suit, what will you do if you found any creases? You will tear that particular dress or you will iron. Obviously, you will prefer to iron the dress before wearing it. So, the judge should iron the creases of the statute before using that statute. How judge will do the ironing? the judge by interpretation or by construction. The word is also known as construction. Instead of interpretation, you will find somewhere it is written construction. So, judge either by interpreting or by construing these kinds of provisions, he will make easy the provision of the statute. So, this is the object of interpretation. Then, after the principles of interpretation. Dear friend, the first rule of this particular interpretation of statute, today I will cover 4 rules. The one is rule of literal construction. This rule of literal construction means the words, phrases and sentences of a statute are ordinarily to be understood in their natural, ordinary or popular and grammatical meaning. Whenever any provision is put before a judge, if that provision is written in a simple language, judge should apply that simple meaning. Instead of making it complicated, you should simply apply the simple provision contained by the statute. So, this is the literal construction. For example, in Indian Penal Code or in any act, any statute, if a particular term is being used by that statute, the statute itself defines that particular meaning of the term. For example, if in Indian Penal Code the word used is public officer, then public officer is already been defined by Indian Penal Code. So, in Indian Penal Code, the meaning of that public officer always means as it is explained in the same statute. If statute itself does not say anything, then you should take the help of the General Clauses Act, which prescribes the various definition of the legal term. So, this is called the literal construction. The second rule is the Mischief Rule or Hayden's Rule. As this rule is explained in Hayden's case, it is also known as Hayden's Rule. What is the meaning of the Mischief Rule? When the material words, again the word came material, as is explained by Sir Denning, when the material words are capable of bearing 2 or more constructions, which means 2 or more interpretation, the most firmly established rule for construction of such words should be taken, or of all statute in general, is the rule laid down in Hayden's case. If one particular provision or the word used in one statute have more than 2 meanings, then in general, in other statute also, if the same word is used, then what is the meaning of that word in the other statute? So, that should be considered in case if the one word which is used by the statute is having 2 or more construction, then this other meaning should also be considered while applying this meaning of the word used by the statute. How one will use the one meaning though it is different in all statute? For that, this Hayden's Rule or the Mischief Rule gives us 4 various questions. They are: what was the law before the making of the act? If you find an answer, you should apply that meaning of the previous law. The second question is, what was the mischief for which the law did not provide? What is the loophole which is there for which law is silent? That if you found any answer, if you interpret that provision, it is considered as the mischief rule. The third question is, what is the remedy that the act has provided? If the act has provided any remedy, then to make available that remedy, if the meaning of that ambiguous word is changed but remedy is justified, then you should apply that interpretation for that particular word. And the fourth question is, what is the reason of the remedy? Why that particular remedy is prescribed in the statute? If you find positiveness in this remedy with other meaning as explained in the very other statute, then this particular interpretation falls under the second rule, that is mischief rule of interpretation. Dear friend, very precisely I would like to discuss this case of CIT MP Madhya Pradesh Bhopal versus Sodra Devi, AIR 1957, Supreme Court, page 832, where was the construction of section 16 clause 3 of the Indian Income Tax Act 1922, which was the older act, was the question of this case, whereby this clause 3 says that in computing the income of any individual assessee, income includes subclause A, so much of the income of a wife or minor child of such individual as arises indirectly or directly. Dear friend, when this case came, it was the habit of the male to enter into the agreement with his wife, and by that agreement the person or the male were carrying on the business whereby their children were entered as the beneficiary of the business. So what happens in these kind of cases, husband and in the name of husband and wife business was carrying on, and the children were entered as the beneficiary of the business, and by this manner income was suppressed by the assessee. This was the general behavior in during this year of 1922 between 1957. So court construed this provision as any person includes only male, whether this any person includes male or female. They observed like the only intention of the legislature in doing so was to include the income derived by the wife or minor child in computation of the total income of the male assessee, the husband or the father, as I have stated earlier, as the case may be, for the purpose of assessment. Therefore, the words any individual were restricted to males. So, this kind of business was carried on by males mostly. So, any person includes only male. So, this was clarified by the Supreme Court in Sobra Devi case, whereby the rule taken was the mischievous rule. Dear friend, this is the second rule I have discussed. The further other rules, there are still more rules that I will discuss later on. I hope I have given fully explanation to you to understand the provision of interpretation of statute. Thank you very much.
SANDHAN, All Gujarat Integrated Classroom.
સેટેલાઇટના માધ્યમથી જોડતી કડી એટલે સંધાન.